Imagine everything you've ever been told about history, about the Bible, about the origins of humanity, collapsing in an instant. Picture the pages of childhood storybooks, Sunday school lessons, even the sermons you've heard, suddenly bursting into flames, burning away to reveal a bold, breathtaking truth that rewrites the story of you. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just a discovery, it's a reckoning. For centuries, a veil has shrouded the past, woven by hands terrified of the power of what lies beneath. Today, we rip it apart. 7 astonishing truths about black people in the Bible. Truths buried, denied, erased, are about to explode into the light. And trust me, by the end, you won't just be watching a story. You'll be standing on the edge of a revolution. You've been fed a narrative, a carefully crafted tale where the heroes of faith look nothing like the land that birthed them, where the cradle of life is painted pale and detached from its true roots. But what if I told you that the Bible itself, the book you've held in your hands, whispers a different song, a song that echoes from the deep, fertile black soil of Africa, from the lips of kings and queens, priests and prophets, whose skin shimmered like the midnight sky? This isn't rewriting the Bible, it's reading it truly. For the first time, these 7 truths will shake the foundations of what you've been taught, not to divide, but to unite us in a story far grander than the one we've settled for. Here's the promise. If you stay until the end, you'll walk away with more than knowledge. You'll carry a fire, a spark that can ignite conversations, heal old wounds, and redraw the map of history in your mind. We're not here to point fingers or settle scores. We're here to uncover what's been hidden in plain sight, to marvel at the divine tapestry where every thread, every hue matters. So brace yourself. The first truth is coming, and it's about to unravel everything you thought you knew about where we all began. Let's start at the beginning, the real beginning. Genesis, dust, breath. The moment humanity took its first steps. You've heard this story 1,000 times. And God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. But pause. Picture that dust, not the gray ash of a European field, but the rich black earth of Africa, glinting under the sun. Science confirms it. The Bible hints at it. Yet for centuries, we've been sold a lie, that the first man, the first woman, didn't rise from the cradle of the continent where life began. This isn't speculation. It's a truth whispered in ancient texts and carved into the bones of the earth. Why does this matter? Because Adam's story isn't just about one man. It's about all of us. If Africa is the womb of humanity, then the opening pages of the Bible aren't a footnote. They're a love letter to a people whose heritage has been buried under centuries of silence. And that silence, it's not accidental. It's a choice, crafted by empires, artists, and kings who painted Eden as a pale paradise to match their own image. But truth doesn't bend. The rivers of Genesis, Gihon winding through Ethiopia, flow through African lands. The dust of creation wasn't borrowed from elsewhere. It was home. This is the first astonishing truth. And it's not just a challenge. It's an invitation to see yourself in the mirror of God's design. So what happens when we peel back the layers? When we stop imagining Adam and Eve as strangers to the land they came from, you start seeing the Bible differently, not as a story owned by one culture, but as a chorus sung by every voice. And that's where this journey takes us next. Because if Africa birthed humanity, its children didn't just fade into the background. They shaped the pages of Scripture in ways you've never been told. Get ready, because the second truth is coming, and it's going to make you question everything you've ever believed. Astonishing truth #1. The origin in Africa. Let's begin where it all started. Not some vague, distant beginning in someone's imagination, but a real, vibrant beginning etched into the black soil of Africa. Genesis says God shaped man from the dust of the ground, breathed life into him, and he became a living soul. But what was that dust? Not the pale clay of European paintings hung in churches, nor the dry sand of a foreign land. It was the deep, nutrient-rich black earth of Africa. the land science now calls the cradle of humanity. The first footprints of humankind are found here, in the Rift Valley, where bones tell a story textbooks often skip. But the Bible tells it too, in its own way. The river Gihon, mentioned in Genesis, flows through the land of Ethiopia, a land not peripheral to the creation story, but central to it. Imagine Adam opening his eyes for the first time, not under the gray skies of a northern plain, but under the blazing African sun, where mountains rise, rivers roar, and life bursts forth with every breath. He wasn't a stranger to this land. He was part of it, molded from the very black soil he stood upon. But the story doesn't stop there. Picture a modern man, an archaeologist named Kofi, who spent his life digging through East African ruins. One day, under the scorching sun, he uncovers an ancient bone fragment alongside shards of a long-forgotten scroll. As he translates it, he realizes it's an oral tale from a local tribe, recounting a man formed from the earth, living among rivers and trees, a story predating the Bible's writing. But when Kofi brings this to academic conferences, he faces ridicule and denial. Impossible, they say. Life didn't start there. Yet truth doesn't care about their comfort. A storm rolls in, threatening to destroy his excavation site, but Kofi stands firm, guarding these pieces of the past like they're his own life. Why? Because this truth isn't just about Adam. It's about all of us. If Africa is where life began, then every human on this planet carries a piece of that land, no matter their skin or origin. But for centuries, this story has been twisted. Church paintings show Adam and Eve with pale skin, standing in a garden that looks more like England than Ethiopia. Those images weren't accidents. They were tools of empires that wanted to remake humanity's origin in their own likeness. They didn't want you to know that Africa's black soil was the starting point for us all, that the Bible's rivers flowed through lands they'd later seek to conquer. This truth is astonishing because it forces us to look again at ourselves in the mirror and see not just our own face, but the face of all humanity, shaped from the same soil. It's not a story of division, but of connection, a reminder that from the beginning, God designed a tapestry where every shade matters. Astonishing truth. #2. Moses and the Ethiopian queen now step into the desert, where a man named Moses leads his people out of Egypt's chains. You know this story. The staff, the parted sea, the 10 Commandments. But there's a detail, often overlooked, one that changes how we see this great leader. In Numbers 12, we read that Moses married an Ethiopian woman, a woman from Cush, a mighty kingdom south of Egypt, known to historians. She wasn't a faint side character in Moses' story. She was a vibrant part of it. Imagine her as Zahra, a warrior princess from Cush, with eyes blazing like fire and a will stronger than any sword. Zahra wasn't just a random wife. She left her kingdom to stand beside Moses, bringing the wisdom of her people, from astronomy to medicine, knowledge the Cushites had honed for centuries. When Miriam and Aaron opposed Moses over this marriage, it wasn't just about Zahra's skin. It was Miriam's fear that she, an Israelite woman, was being overshadowed. Miriam wrestled with her identity, threatened by this foreign woman who was not only beautiful but wise. But God didn't side with Miriam. When she spoke against Zahra, God struck her with leprosy, turning her skin white as snow, a stark warning that in his eyes, no one is diminished by their origin or color. Picture this scene. One day, the Israelite camp is hit by a mysterious plague. The people panic, but Zahra steps forward, carrying an ancient remedy from Cush, a blend of herbs she learned from her ancestors. She works through the night, saving hundreds, and as the sun rises, those who doubted her bow their heads in silence. Her presence wasn't a random detail. It's proof that God chose people from every land to play a role in his plan. But why is this story rarely told? Because it doesn't fit the picture many want to paint of Moses, a lone hero, untouched by other cultures. Yet the truth is, Zahra, this Ethiopian woman, brought something to the Israelites more precious than gold: life, and wisdom. She was a bridge between worlds, and through her, we see that the Bible's story isn't monochrome. It's a vivid portrait of diversity, where God uses people from every corner of the earth to fulfill his will. Astonishing truth. 3. The legacy of the Ethiopian eunuch. Now leap to the New Testament, where an Ethiopian man steps into the story of Christianity's birth. In Acts 8, we meet a eunuch, a high official under Queen Candace, who'd come to Jerusalem to worship and was heading home. He's no minor figure. He's a scholar, a man of intellect, reading the prophet Isaiah on his chariot when Philip, led by the Spirit, approaches. Call him Bekele, a man not just wealthy but hungry for truth. As Philip explains the gospel, Bekele doesn't just listen. He sees the link between ancient prophecies and Jesus' mission, a connection he believes matters deeply to his people. After his baptism, Bekele doesn't just return to Ethiopia with a story. He carries a mission. Imagine him writing a letter to Queen Candace, recounting what he's learned and urging her to build a community of Jesus followers. That letter, lost to history, sparks a movement. An early African church thriving centuries before Christianity took root in Europe. But Bekele's journey wasn't easy. As Philip races to his chariot, Roman soldiers pursue, suspicious of anyone carrying new ideas from Jerusalem. Bekele and Philip hide in the desert shadows, where water from a small stream becomes a symbol of his rebirth. The astonishing truth here isn't just his salvation, it's that he brought the gospel back to Africa, making the continent one of the first to embrace the good news. This shatters the notion that Christianity was a European invention imposed on Africa through colonialism. Instead, it shows Africa as integral to the salvation story from the start. Bekele's legacy doesn't end there. The churches he helped plant quietly flourished, preserving the faith through centuries of chaos, a living testament that God sowed his seeds across the earth, regardless of borders or skin. Astonishing truth. 4. The burden of Simon of Cyrene. Now come to one of the Bible's pivotal moments, Jesus' crucifixion. In Mark 15:21, we read of Simon, a man from Cyrene, a North African region, now Libya, forced to carry Jesus' cross on the road to Golgotha. Simon wasn't a random bystander. He was a father, a merchant, a man with a life of his own swept into history's greatest event. Imagine Simon as a cloth trader in Jerusalem to sell goods, with his two young sons, Alexander and Rufus, in tow. He didn't want to get involved in this execution. He just wanted to finish his work and go home. But when Roman soldiers yank him from the crowd, placing the heavy cross on his shoulders, everything changes. As he walks, Jesus' blood and sweat soak into his cloak, and in a fleeting moment, he locks eyes with him. A whisper stirs in his mind, a prophecy he doesn't yet grasp. Your children will carry my light. Simon bears the cross not just by force, but by destiny's call. After that day, he can't return to his old life. He tells the story to Alexander and Rufus, who grow up to become unsung missionaries, spreading the gospel to distant lands. A lost ancient scrap, credited to Simon, reportedly recorded his account, describing the moment he felt the weight, not just of the cross, but of the world. The astonishing truth here is that an African played a central role in the salvation story, not a footnote, but an active participant in God's plan. But why do we rarely hear of him? Because Simon's story doesn't fit the paintings of a European Jesus surrounded by pale faces. Instead, it reminds us that people from every land were called to bear the cross, literally and figuratively, and their legacy echoes through time. Astonishing truth. 5. The forgotten African empires. Step outside the Bible for a moment and into the forgotten pages of Africa's great empires. Mali, Kush, and Great Zimbabwe aren't fairy tales. They were mighty, wealthy, advanced kingdoms that shaped the ancient world. Picture a merchant from Mali named Ibrahim leading a camel caravan laden with gold across the desert to Jerusalem. He doesn't just carry wealth. He brings books, ideas, and stories of his ancestors. Mali, under King Mansa Musa, was so rich its gold shook the economies of every place he visited. Kush, along the Nile Valley, once defeated ancient Egypt, building pyramids and temples that still stand. Great Zimbabwe, with its massive stone walls, testifies to African builders' skill, needing no outside guidance to craft wonders. Ibrahim knows this, but in Jerusalem, he hears whispers from European traders that Africa is a wild, uncivilized land. One day, his caravan is ambushed by bandits intent on erasing his greatness. But Ibrahim fights, not just for his gold, but for the truth. Meanwhile, in Timbuktu, a hidden library holds ancient scrolls, some recounting ties between Africa and biblical events, stories later deliberately destroyed by explorers to bolster the idea that Africa had no significant history. The astonishing truth here is that these empires didn't just exist. They connected the world, trading with the Middle East and beyond, long before Europe awoke. But later empires hid this greatness, burning libraries, destroying evidence, and rewriting history to cast Africa as a land needing civilizing. This truth forces us to look again, to see that black people weren't just victims in history. They were leaders, innovators, and builders of the world we know. Astonishing truth. #6. Black innovators in faith and science turn now to individuals who changed the world, not just through faith, but through ingenuity. Take Onesimus, an enslaved African in colonial North America, who taught Cotton Mather a smallpox inoculation method from Africa. But Onesimus wasn't a random storyteller. Imagine him as a healer, trained in his ancestors' ancient rites, where he learned to use herbs and techniques to protect his community. When enslaved and brought to America, he carried that knowledge, not just to survive, but to save others. One night, as smallpox ravaged Boston, Onesimus stood before a skeptical crowd, explaining how he could protect them. But they mocked him, calling him ignorant. Yet as those he treated recovered, silence fell, and Cotton Mather reluctantly credited him, though history later gave the glory to others. But Onesimus' story runs deeper. His methods weren't just science. They stemmed from biblical purification rites his ancestors practiced, a blend of faith and wisdom he carried in his heart. In modern times, a scientist named Amina uncovers Onesimus' lost journals in an old library, pages recounting his life and discoveries. When she publishes this, she faces pushback from those unwilling to admit an enslaved African laid foundations for modern medicine. The astonishing truth here is that black people have contributed to science and faith from ancient times to now, often uncredited, erased from books by prejudice and unjust systems. But their legacy can't be erased. It lives in every vaccine, every field improved by figures like George Washington Carver, and every discovery hidden by those who didn't want the truth known. Astonishing truth. #7. The global African soul. Finally, look at how Africa has shaped the world's soul through its culture and spirit. From the deep rhythms of gospel to the pulse of hip-hop, modern music bears Africa's mark. Drums, call and response, and raw emotion rooted in ancient worship rites by the Nile and beyond. Imagine a poet named Jabari, living thousands of years ago, traveling through the Middle East and India with his poems and psalms. He stops in remote villages, singing of a God who made the world from earth and breath, verses echoing the Psalms without anyone knowing their source. One day, a storm strands him on a foreign kingdom's coast, where he meets a king captivated by his words. The king orders Jabari's poems recorded, and over centuries, they spread, influencing music and language worldwide. In modern times, a musician named Zara finds a faded copy of these poems in an old market, and as she sings them, she sparks a global movement, reconnecting people to their African roots in ways no one expected. The astonishing truth here is that Africa's influence isn't confined to its borders. It's crossed oceans, shaping how we sing, speak, and worship. The Gula community's language in America carries West African traces. Brazil's samba echoes Congo drums, and even church hymns bear the imprint of ancient rites Jabari once sang. But for too long, these influences were deemed lesser or stolen without credit. This truth reminds us that Africa's soul is part of the global soul, a legacy alive in every note and prayer, linking us across time and space. These 7 astonishing truths aren't just stories, they're invitations to change how you see the world. Picture a crowd by a river, each person holding a stone, building a monument to truth together. Black, white, brown, all lay their stones, no one above another, just unity. That's the vision in Revelation. A countless multitude from every nation, tribe, and tongue, standing before God's throne. No hierarchy, just equality in His grace. These truths may shock you, may unsettle you, but they also give you a responsibility. What will you do with them? Will you cling to the old narrative, or will you dig deeper, seeking truth in the Bible, in history, and in stories hidden too long? Share this with your family, friends, community. Ask them which truth surprises them most, and why. If you're Black, this is your heritage, a story of strength, faith, and resilience. If you're not, it's still your story, because honoring others' contributions doesn't diminish you. It enriches the tapestry we're all part of. Truth has power to heal, to unite, and to draw us closer to God's heart, who delights in every facet of His creation. This journey may not be easy. It takes courage to face what's been hidden, to question what you've been taught, and to embrace a bigger story. But the reward is worth it. A world where every voice is heard, every story told, and every person seen through the lens of love and truth. These 7 truths are before you. Where will you go from here? The choice is yours, and the moment is now.